Flight 227 lifted off from Los Angeles just as the sun began to sink behind the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. For most passengers, it was just another routine flight, 3 hours to Chicago, nothing extraordinary. People were already settling into their seats, clicking seatbelts, and adjusting their headphones. The gentle hum of the engines filled the cabin with a sense of normalcy. But in seat 14C, Camille Rivers sat still, her hands resting on her knees, her gaze steady as though she was observing everything and nothing at once. Camille looked like any other traveler, simple navy hoodie, faded jeans, and a carry-on stuffed under the seat. She blended in, even more so because she wanted to. Few knew she had once been a Navy pilot, someone who had survived combat zones and storms that would terrify any ordinary person. But she wasn't here to relive that life. She was here to forget. Her life now was quiet consulting work, rare flights, and memories she never spoke of. She wasn't the kind of person to seek attention. In fact, she avoided it at all costs. Across the aisle, a businessman was typing furiously on his laptop, the clattering of keys faster than the engines. Rhythm. A mother 3 rows back tried to calm her toddler, handing him a toy airplane that he held proudly, making little flying noises. The cabin crew moved with calm precision, offering drinks and snacks, and the passengers started to drift into their own worlds, some watching movies, others reading books, a few already asleep. Everything felt normal, safe, predictable. Camille glanced out the window. Clouds floated like massive cotton swirls, glowing faintly under the setting sun. She let out a slow breath, resting her head back. Flying didn't scare her. Nothing about being in the air did. But something about being on this flight. Something in her gut whispered that tonight wouldn't be ordinary. Half an hour passed when it happened. The plane shuddered. Just slightly. Like turbulence, most passengers ignored it. The businessman frowned at his laptop but kept typing. Camille, however, sat up straight. That wasn't turbulence. That was a mechanical jolt, small, but telling. Her pilot instincts kicked in like a reflex she couldn't suppress. She turned her ear slightly, listening to the hum of the engines, a faint, offbeat whine. Her heart tightened. Something wasn't right. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. A few passengers looked up, uneasy but not alarmed. Camille's eyes narrowed. She knew what power fluctuations felt like, and this was one. Then. Without warning, it all happened at once. A violent lurch threw passengers forward. Oxygen masks dropped with a hiss, and the engines went eerily silent. The constant, reassuring hum was gone. In its place was a deafening stillness, punctuated by the sound of passengers screaming. Trays clattered to the floor, drinks spilled, a baby began to cry. Someone shouted, "What's happening?" Camille stayed frozen, not out of fear, but calculation. No sound came from the cockpit, not a single word over the intercom. Not a single reassurance from the captain. She slowly reached up, pulling the oxygen mask down, securing it over her face. Around her, people fumbled, some forgetting to put theirs on in panic. The man next to her gripped the armrests, his knuckles white, muttering prayers under his breath. For most passengers, this felt like the end, a free fall. A nightmare in the sky, but for Camille, it was something else. It was a test. Her mind, trained through years of military flight, was already mapping out scenarios. Engine failure, total power loss, altitude drop. Oh. She took one sharp breath through the mask and stared toward the front of the plane. There was silence from the cockpit, and that silence spoke louder than anything. Are the pilots even awake up there? Someone shouted. Camille didn't wait to find out. She knew, deep down, that if something was going to be done, she would have to do it. Her hand reached for the seatbelt buckle. The moment it clicked open, the man beside her stared at her like she'd lost her mind. What are you doing? Sit down, we're going to crash. He yelled. Camille turned to him, her voice calm but commanding. We're not crashing. Not. If I can help it. Asterisk, and with that she stood up while everyone else braced for death. Camille moved swiftly through the narrow aisle as the plane shuddered again, this time more violently. The overhead compartments rattled, a few swinging open, spilling out bags and coats. Passengers screamed louder, now panic rising like a wave. No one could stop. Some clutched their loved ones. Others shut their eyes, as if willing themselves to wake up from the nightmare. Asterisk, she kept moving forward, step by step, balancing as the plane rocked side to side. Oxygen masks dangled like ghostly vines from the ceiling. In row 20, an elderly man was gasping through his mask while a younger woman next to him fumbled with hers. Camille bent down without hesitation, secured the elastic around the woman's head and nodded firmly. Breathe slow, you'll be okay. Asterisk, the woman blinked. Are you crew? Asterisk, Camille didn't answer. She stood and continued forward, asterisk, as she reached the galley near the front of the plane. A flight attendant tried to stop her, mid-30s, short blonde hair, terror in her eyes. Asterisk, ma'am, you need to return to your seat. We're trying to contact the cockpit. Asterisk, Camille interrupted with authority. Are the pilots responding? Asterisk, the woman hesitated. No, not since we lost power. We've tried. It's like they're not there. Asterisk, Camille's eyes darted to the cockpit door. It was sealed, unlit. No flickers of motion, no voices, not even a shadow. She stepped past the attendant. Asterisk, ma'am. You can't go in there. Asterisk, Camille turned her head sharply. If I don't, no one is flying this plane. Asterisk, the tone in her voice froze the attendant mid-step. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it, like someone who had been here before. Asterisk, Camille scanned the wall beside the cockpit. She knew the design well. Most aircraft followed the same protocols. Behind a small plastic cover was a hidden emergency access panel. She popped it open, revealing a numeric keypad and override keyhole. The crew member behind her said, "Only senior flight staff have that." Asterisk, Camille held up her wallet. Inside it, behind her old military ID, was an aviation clearance tag. Used to be a Navy test pilot. I trained half the people flying today's planes. She inserted the key and typed a code she hadn't used in years. A click echoed from the door. She pulled it open. Inside, the cockpit was dim, lit only by the faint red glow of emergency lights and the flashing indicators screaming mechanical. Chaos. Camille stepped in and stopped. Asterisk, both pilots were slumped forward. Eyes wide but vacant, their hands still on the controls. Not unconscious, but paralyzed. The captain, a man in his late 40s, stared blankly at the dashboard. Sweat glistened on his forehead. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Asterisk, the co-pilot, younger and pale, kept tapping the same switch repeatedly. His lips quivered. No response. No hydraulics. No, it's all... He finally noticed her. Asterisk, who are you? He asked Tamu, red. Camille didn't answer. She stepped between them, eyes immediately assessing the situation. The screens were flickering, some blank, others overloaded with warnings. Altitude was dropping, airspeed was erratic, communications dead. Asterisk, she reached for the backup bus switch and flipped it. Nothing. Then she opened the secondary panel under the captain's seat. A trick she'd learned on a similar aircraft during a wartime emergency years ago. Asterisk, what are you doing? The captain whispered, finally snapping out of his daze. You can't be in here. Asterisk, I'm not here for permission, Camille said calmly. I'm here because you're both frozen and we're falling out of the sky. Asterisk, she slid into the jump seat beside the controls and scanned the systems with terrifying clarity. She saw the patterns in the chaos. The electrical system had failed catastrophically. But one backup circuit deep in the avionics bay might still be rerouted manually. Asterisk, she spoke in short, precise commands. Captain, I need you to stabilize. The pitch trim manually. Co-pilot open comes relay. There's a dead channel we can bypass using analog. Asterisk, the captain blinked, overwhelmed. I've never done that. That's not standard protocol. Asterisk, she locked eyes with him. Neither is crashing with 178 people. Asterisk, he nodded, shakily. Hands moved to the trim wheel. The co-pilot's fingers trembled as he pulled out a dusty manual connector from beneath the console. Asterisk. The cabin crew's voice came through the intercom suddenly. Any updates from the cockpit? We're losing altitude fast, passengers are panicking. Asterisk. Camille grabbed the mic. This is Camille Rivers. I'm in control of the flight now. Stay calm, secure all passengers. We're working on restoring partial flight systems. Do not panic. Asterisk. There was silence on the line. Then a soft, stunned response. Yes, ma'am. Asterisk. Behind her, both pilots watched her with a mix of awe and disbelief. She didn't look like a hero. She didn't act like a savior. But in that moment, she was the only one who had not surrendered to fear. Asterisk. And for the first time since the sky went silent, the plane had a fighting chance. The cockpit was no longer silent. Asterisk. As Camille took over the controls, the room buzzed with flickers of life-warning lights blinked. Gauges shook wildly, and alarms howled with mechanical fury. But amidst that chaos, something else returned too. Direction. For the first time since the failure, someone was commanding the situation. Asterisk. Camille's hands moved with swift, efficient precision, flipping switches, bypassing systems, and rerouting circuits like she'd built the plane herself. In truth, she hadn't built it, but she had once test-flown its prototype cousin, years ago during her secretive government project days. What felt like an impossible storm to the men beside her was, to Camille, a long-buried second language. Returning under pressure. Asterisk. The captain leaned toward her, sweat beading on his temple. Who are you exactly? Asterisk. I told you, she muttered, eyes never leaving the instrument cluster. Camille Rivers, civilian now. But 10 years Navy? 5 as a test pilot, 2 more Black Ops. You can ask later if we land. Asterisk. His eyes widened. He said nothing more. Asterisk. Outside the windshield, storm clouds swallowed their view. The sun had completely vanished, replaced by a sea of gray turbulence. A bolt of lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the outline of the wings. The plane jolted violently. The co-pilot flinched and reached for the yoke. Don't, Camille said firmly. I've got it. Asterisk. But we're in a dive, he said, voice thin. We should. Asterisk. We're in a controlled dive, she corrected, gripping the controls. I'm bleeding off altitude to regain airspeed and trim. Unless you want us to stall out and spiral, sit still and follow my lead. Asterisk. The words weren't cruel. They were clinical, commanding, the tone of someone who had been here before and survived. The co-pilot swallowed and nodded. The plane dipped lower, airspeed stabilizing slowly. Warning alarms still screamed, but some instruments began to flicker back into partial function. The manual backup systems Camille rerouted were crude, decades-old tech buried beneath modern automation, but they worked. Old-school analog solutions in a digital world. Asterisk. She reached under the console, flipped an auxiliary fuse relay. A few screens blinked back to life. Asterisk. There, she whispered. We've got partial nav and pitch trim. Not enough to auto-land, but enough to get dirty. Asterisk. The captain raised an eyebrow. You're going to fly this down, dead stick? Asterisk. I'm not going to try, she replied. I'm going to do it. Back in the cabin, the chaos had reached a fever pitch. Some passengers were crying. Others were praying. A teenage boy was filming everything with his phone, whispering to the camera, We're going to die on this flight. I love you, Mom. Asterisk. But as Camille's voice came over the intercom again clear, strong, and terrifyingly calm, the energy in the cabin shifted. Asterisk. This is Camille Rivers speaking again. We have partial flight control. I'm guiding the aircraft manually. We will be descending through storm cover and attempting an emergency landing. I need all passengers and crew to secure themselves, remain silent, and prepare for instructions. You're not alone. I've got you. She clicked off. For a moment, the cabin went silent, not out of fear, but awe. The passengers had no idea who this woman was. She wasn't crew. She wasn't supposed to be flying the plane, but somehow she was. And her voice had more authority and composure than anyone they'd ever heard from a cockpit. Asterisk. A child whispered, Mommy. She sounds like a superhero. Asterisk, the mother pulled her child close. She might be... And, back in the cockpit, Camille narrowed her eyes. Altimeter read 9,000 and dropping fast. She had to pick a target. Asterisk, Captain, open terrain radar. Tell me what's underneath us. Asterisk, he struggled. Nothing for 50 miles. But, wait. There's a long stretch of flat farmland about 12 miles southeast. Old emergency airstrip. Asterisk. Mark it? That's where we're going. She rolled the yoke slightly. Tell them to brace. The co-pilot keyed the PA. Brace. For landing. Assume crash position. Asterisk inside the cabin. Chaos turned into desperate action. Passengers tucked their heads. Screams returned. Someone threw up. Someone else passed out. But through it all, Camille was calm, focused. The storm. Outside, worsened wind howling, lightning dancing around the wings. The aircraft was still bleeding altitude, but now with intention. Every move Camille made was precise. Every adjustment countered wind shear, roll, and drag. Asterisk, she spoke out loud, more to herself than anyone. Come on. Come on, asterisk, altitude. 3,000, asterisk. The field came into view barely. Overgrown grass wide enough, no lights, no markers, no control tower. Just land, asterisk, she flipped down the gear override. No hydraulic assist, manual drop only. She reached between the seats, engaged the manual crank lever. It was old, rusted, but moved. Asterisk, with every rotation, she could hear the gears screech. She didn't care. A loud thunk echoed beneath them. Gears locked, the captain confirmed. Camille exhaled once. Flaps at 50, angle good. We're landing this bird. Asterisk, the co-pilot whispered. I don't believe this. Asterisk, the captain just stared at her. Asterisk, and then they broke through the clouds green below, sky behind them. Final approach. Asterisk, Camille held the yoke steady. And in that moment, everything went silent again, not out of fear, but out of resolve. Asterisk, she was going to do it. She was going to land a powerless plane. Camille's eyes narrowed as the overgrown strip of land stretched out beneath the plane, barely visible, unmarked, unlit. It wasn't a runway. It wasn't even pavement. It looked like an abandoned stretch of farmland carved by old tires and time, but it was all they had. Asterisk, she pulled gently on the yoke, adjusting pitch and flare angle. The wind fought her, cross-blasting from the right side. The plane tilted just slightly. She responded instantly with a roll correction, rebalancing the wings. The instruments were blinking madly. The altitude indicator screamed as they dipped. Below 2,000 feet. Asterisk, inside the cockpit, the captain and co-pilot were speechless, completely entranced by what they were witnessing. Asterisk, you've done this before? The captain asked softly, still gripping the sides of his seat. Asterisk, Camille didn't take her eyes off the horizon. Twice, both in combat, one in Kandahar, the other in the Arctic. Neither of those had 178 civilians in the back. Asterisk, her voice was steady, but her mind was calculating 1,000 things per second: ground slope, descent angle, drag compensation, wind patterns, gear lock status. Any one of them could fail and doom the plane. Asterisk, the co-pilot checked the radar again. No obstructions detected on the landing path. Asterisk, because there's no radar, Camille muttered. I'm landing this like a glider, no thrust, no backup nav. Just my hands and gravity. Asterisk, the co-pilot's mouth dropped slightly. God. Asterisk, she ignored him. Her breathing was slow and rhythmic, focused. Altitude, 900 feet. Speed, 174 knots. Asterisk, she extended partial. Flaps manual only, and felt the drag slow their descent. The aircraft wobbled, but she steadied it. Ahead, the green terrain loomed closer, grass waving under the force of incoming wind. Asterisk, brace for landing. The captain barked over the PA. His voice cracked, but it was loud enough to ripple through the cabin. Asterisk, back in the main cabin, people had their heads down, hands clenched over their skulls. Prayers filled the air. One man whispered every name of his children. A mother gripped her infant to her chest, rocking with her eyes closed. Asterisk, the boy with the toy airplane. He wasn't crying anymore. He was staring ahead, whispering to himself, She's going to save us, she's flying it. And back in the cockpit, Camille muttered, 50 feet. Throttle dead, no margin. The field was rushing up toward them. She pulled back slightly, lifting the nose. The wheels touched, hard. The jolt rattled every bone in the aircraft. Overhead compartments burst open. Luggage flew. Screams erupted, but the tires held. The grass was slick. Muddy from the recent rains, the aircraft skidded to the left. Camille overcorrected with rudder inputs. The plane groaned, every metal joint aching. Dust rose in clouds around the cockpit windows. Visibility dropped to near zero. But she didn't blink. Brake manually, she shouted. The captain reached for the emergency hydraulic lever. Brakes failing, partial response only, We only need partial, Camille said. She angled the yoke right, then straightened. As they passed a ditch on the far left, missing it by inches, the field narrowed. Trees loomed in the distance. Speed still at 90 knots. Too fast. Deploy speed brakes. She barked. Nothing automatic. The co-pilot cried. Camille slammed her palm on the emergency air brake handle near the base of her chair. With a loud clang, two rusty panels popped from the rear of the plane. The drag was instant. The entire aircraft shook violently. Speed dropped. 60 knots, then 40. The trees were just seconds away. Camille yanked the brakes again. The wheels shrieked, the grass smoked, and finally, the plane stopped, dead still. 12 feet from the tree line. Silence. No more alarms. No more flashing lights. No more chaos. Camille exhaled, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. For the first time since the failure, she looked human, not superhuman, not invincible. Just tired. The captain stared at her. That was impossible. She didn't answer. Just looked out the cracked windshield, where birds flew from the trees disturbed by their arrival. A loud ding sounded from the overhead panel. Cabin pressure stabilized. The co-pilot whispered as if shocked the plane even recognized. It was still alive. Camille sat back, resting her head for just a second. Then she stood. We have to evacuate. Some might be injured. Let's move. Emergency doors popped open. Slides deployed. Crew poured into action now, no longer. Frozen, Camille stepped into the aisle of the plane she'd just saved. She walked past row after row of stunned faces, some crying, some clapping, many unable to speak. A little girl with braids reached out and touched her sleeve as she passed. Camille stopped. Are you a real pilot? She asked, voice tiny. Camille smiled softly. I used to be. Today I guess I still am. The girl beamed. As the last of the passengers slid out, Camille stood by the door, watching. No reporters, no cameras. Just wind and sky. She turned to the captain one last time. Tell your airline to check the emergency systems. They failed you. He nodded. What will you do? Camille shrugged. Find another flight. Hopefully one that lands normal. And with that, she descended the slide and disappeared into the crowd. Just another face among survivors unknown to the world, but unforgettable to everyone who had just lived. The field was still smoldering from the impact-scorched grass, muddy ruts dug deep by the aircraft's emergency landing. Ambulances, fire trucks, and helicopters now crowded the scene, their sirens echoing over the countryside. Red and blue. Lights flickered across the metallic fuselage of Flight 227, now resting like a wounded beast that had defied the sky. News vans had already arrived. Journalists jumped from their trucks with cameras rolling, their microphones already live. The world had caught wind of the miracle landing. Breaking news, Flight 227 has made an emergency landing in an abandoned farmland strip just outside Peoria. All 178 passengers are confirmed alive. Rescue efforts are underway. Paramedics rushed to assist the injured, though surprisingly, there were few serious cases. A couple of broken wrists, a dislocated shoulder, a few fainted passengers, but not a single fatality. It was unheard of. It was impossible, but it had happened, and no one knew how. Passengers huddled in foil blankets under tents the rescue teams had set up. Some cried softly, others sat in stunned silence. It wasn't just the crash that haunted them, it was the impossible calm of the woman who had saved them. She wasn't even a pilot on the manifest, one man said to a reporter, his eyes wide. She was just there. Seat 14C, I saw her. Stand up when the masks dropped. While we were panicking, she walked toward the cockpit like she was born to be there. The boy with the toy airplane stood proudly near his mother, clutching a juice box offered by a paramedic. His voice was loud enough for the nearby crew to hear. Her name's Camille. She flew us like a real superhero. And she didn't even scream once. Reporters immediately latched onto the name. Camille. Camille Rivers? They scrambled to confirm her identity, but there was no record of her being crew and no interviews yet. Just stories from passengers and stunned silence from the official airline representatives, who had no idea what had occurred inside the cockpit. The captain and co-pilot eventually emerged, their expressions grave. A swarm of press cornered them. Captain, how did you land with no power? What went wrong? Who was flying the plane? The captain, once a man of pride and professionalism, simply looked into the cameras and said, we were not the heroes of this flight. There was a woman on board, a former military pilot. Camille Rivers. She didn't just fly the plane, she saved 178 lives. She took command when we froze. And she landed it when we couldn't. Gasps, murmurs. The co-pilot nodded beside him, still pale. She took control like she'd done it 100 times. We watched her fight that storm with nothing but partial systems and raw instinct. I've never seen anything like it. But Camille? She wasn't there for the spotlight. She had already left the emergency tent, walked past the medics, past the press. A rescuer tried to stop her. Ma'am? Wait, aren't you? She raised a hand and smiled, soft but firm. I was just a passenger. She walked across the muddy field, her shoes soaked, her hoodie torn slightly at the elbow. She made her way toward the edge of the emergency perimeter where no one was watching, where she could disappear. A reporter spotted her from afar. Camille Rivers, please, just one statement. She paused, just for a second, and turned. I didn't do it for fame. I did it because no one else could. That's all. Then she turned and walked toward the road, the chaos behind her fading with every step. 2 days later, her face was on every news channel. Mystery heroine saves flight 227. Ex-Navy pilot returns from obscurity to defy death. WY. Did Camille Rivers walk away after saving 178 lives? People online debated whether she should receive a medal. Others argued she should be hired as a safety consultant for every airline in the country. But Camille didn't answer interviews. She didn't post online. She didn't reappear. She returned to her small apartment in Colorado, where the snow blanketed her front porch and the mountains stood tall in silence. She brewed herself tea, sat down, and finally, for the first time in years, let herself feel the tremble in her hands. She had been strong when others needed it, unshakable in the air. But now, alone, she let out the breath she hadn't even realized she'd been holding. That night, there was a knock at her door. She opened it slowly. Standing there was the little boy from the plane, his mother. Holding his hand, the airline had tracked her down. Somehow, they had found her. He held something out to her, a small plastic toy airplane. Worn from travel and worry. This is for you, he said. You're the only one who knows how to fly it right. Camille knelt down and accepted the gift. She smiled, not just with her lips, but with something that had been frozen in her heart for years. And for the first time in a long time, Camille Rivers didn't feel like she was running away from something. She felt home.